Thank you again to Misa, to Dean, to Cam for inviting MAPS to be part of the Great Rivers Biennial. Once again, we are always so happy to be here. I am curious, how many of you have attended this workshop before? Okay. Oh, good. All right. So, I recognize a few like MAPS super users. How many of you have done like a MAPS consultation or been to a MAPS program before? All right. Okay. So some is the overwhelming answer. So I'm also really happy to introduce all of you to MAPS. I really hope that you will take advantage of our consultations, our other services and things that we offer. Let me get my clicker here. So, yeah, as Misa said, just a quick introduction. We provide artist consultations, professional development, education, fiscal sponsorship, which is a whole thing I won't get into right now. But we do have the one-on-one consultations that you can book through our website, midwestarts.org. So please do take a moment to check that all out. I also want to say we are all volunteer. MAPS is all volunteer run. So we do have day jobs. So if you email us, we will get back to you. It might not be the same day, but we will get back to you. Before we get into it, I am curious, what disciplines do we have in the room today? How about like painting? Photography? Sculpture, I know. Anything other, any other 2D printmaking? Any printmaking? Yeah, animation, video. Anything we haven't said? Performance, excellent. Anything else? I always ask this question at the start, and then we go through the whole thing, and at the end, someone's like, "Okay, so I'm in between like textiles and animation. Where would I, So it might come across as you start thinking of things, but. I will stop for questions periodically, but if anything's not clear or you want me to slow down or whatever, please don't be afraid to throw up a hand. So what we're going to cover today is the purpose of the program, applicant eligibility, the review process, what happens after you hit send, the selection criteria, and the actual nitty-gritty application components. So the purpose of the award, I think is, you might say like, well, duh, it's to give me money for my brilliant ideas. And it is, but, for the institution and for the city of St. Louis, it's meant to identify talented emerging and mid-career artists from the St. Louis area and really raise the profile of the work that's being done here to a national stage, to a national audience. And that happens really at the very start of this process with the selection of those amazing jurors. I mean, you guys did a great job recruiting those jurors, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. The winners receive an unrestricted grant of $25,000. I noticed that is an increase. Yes, increase. So I applaud you, unlike so many other areas of life, with actually keeping up with, with the times and increasing the award. And of course, your proposed work, in its final form, being featured in an exhibition here at the museum. Oh, and I do want to mention that it is collaborative with the Gateway Foundation. Can't forget the sponsor. So I always try and point out what is meant by emerging or mid-career, because these types of words get, especially emerging, get thrown around a lot in when you're looking at opportunities, calls for proposals, things like that. And so, what does that mean? It does not mean young. I mean, there have been people who have received this award who have been, graduate, like they've been out of school for a long time, and actually some who are not young, who actually were new out of school, like Ron Young. But there's no age limit. Past winners have been all ages. So please do not think that emerging mid-career has anything to do with age. It's where you are in your artist career. Mid-career means a wide range. Generally, though, it means that your work has been seen in public before. May or may not be at a major institution, but that it's been out there in the world. You are a working artist. Why should you apply? because you take your art career seriously. So first and foremost, let me applaud all of you who are here, who are taking this opportunity seriously. It takes time to put this application together, you know? And believe me, I'm well aware, like artists, some people say like, oh, I got this thing, it's like a second job. Artists have like 4 jobs, right? I mean, you've got to pay the bills, you've got, you know, your life stuff you got to take care of, you have your creative practice, and then all the other stuff you got to do to be a working artist. You know, at NYFA, the New York Foundation for the Arts, where I used to work, that one of the program staff there used to say that artists are the CEO of a one-person small business. Yep, yeah. You got to do your own marketing, you got to keep your website up, you got to put out a newsletter, you got to, you know, price your work, you got to you got to apply for that grant. It's a hustle, right? So, and for a long time, you do all that work, and sometimes you feel like, is there anything to show for it? Dedicating your time to these kinds of opportunities, it means you are taking your art career seriously, right? How many of you feel like you can, you know, if someone says, what do you do, would say, I'm an artist, first and foremost. Good. Okay, good. Spending time on this kind of stuff means you can say that and, you know, be proud of it, right? Opportunities and deadlines can be prompts to realize ideas. You know, things like, you know, what would you do, you know, with an exhibition at CAM? It really does force you to put pen to paper, right? And work through it and do the work and figure it out. And they can be, you know, like I said, they can be prompts, you know, to give you some accountability, to say, okay, I've been thinking about this for a long time. It's time for me to actually think about what would it take to make this a reality. You know, I mean, timelines, budgets, all this stuff that's kind of a drag to do, but I like to think of it as a magic spell that turns your dreams into reality. That's a very cheesy way of putting that, but you know, but at the end of the day, that's how it gets done. It really is one of the very best opportunities for St. Louis artists. You know, the fact that there are 3 that are selected, I think you had about 150 applications last year. I mean, those are pretty good odds, you know? It's a great opportunity to, you know, have your work seen by a large audience, by people from outside St. Louis. You know, there's lots of testimonials from previous recipients that it really was this launch pad, you know, for the next phase of their career. It gets your work in front of national curators, even if you aren't selected. Again, I added the jurors to a slide. I mean, you know, one of the biggest challenges that I hear artists working in St. Louis talk about is being seen outside St. Louis. This is a way to do that. So even if you aren't selected, these are folks, you know, with tremendous influence that are seeing your work, and if they're interested, they'll follow up. And your application materials can be recycled. You know, when you put the energy and effort in for getting your artist statement together, getting some proposal ideas together, there's all kinds of stuff in and outside of St. Louis that you can use it for. So, you know, the Regional Arts Commission deadline is coming up. So, you know, if you get it ready to go, you can, you know, go ahead and use parts of it for that. So, application timeline, application deadline is Sunday, June 1st, 1 minute to midnight. Oh, and these slides and this video will be available afterwards. So, yeah, just please don't feel like you need to. I mean, I know it's helpful sometimes to like take pictures of stuff that you really, really want to remember, but also please don't feel like you have to. With any kind of deadline, I strongly feel that you should not just have the deadline in your planner, but go back, May 10th, application due in 3 weeks. May 24th, application due in 1 week. May 31st is a really bad time to remember that this deadline is tomorrow, right? So if it's not on your planner now, we can take a minute and you can put these reminders in. Then after the deadline is submitted, there will be 10 semifinalists chosen by July 21st. There will be these studio visits in late July or early to mid-August. We will talk about how important it is for you to be here for that. The winners announced in August 25, and then the exhibition in September of 26 through February of 27. Obviously, those things might change a little bit depending on when people can come in and out of town, but those are the main things to remember. We're going to talk about residency and being here in St. Louis. So the semifinalists, if you are chosen as one of the 10 semifinalists, you really have to be here for the in-person studio visit. It can't be done with video. I mean, this is an opportunity for you to meet these curators who are coming into St. Louis from these amazing institutions. Like, it's a great opportunity. Yeah, Martha. It is okay. If you don't have your own studio space available, which frankly most artists don't, we'll work something out. So don't let that deter you. Don't worry about it. So yeah, just keep in mind, like if you're making travel plans, if you're having other things going on. I mean, I think there will be some flexibility, but probably just. Maybe don't intentionally plan a big trip, just then. Okay, so again, just another note about eligibility. The media, I asked the question about the different mediums people are working in. I didn't hear anything that seemed, like it, you might need to double check if it would be eligible. But if you have any questions about eligibility in terms of media, like that is definitely something you should reach out and ask about before you spend a lot of time putting a proposal together. Also, this is for artists living and working in St. Louis and in the city, county, St. Charles, and then St. Clair and Madison in Illinois areas. Again, if you have a question about eligibility based on your residence, for whatever reason, that is something to clarify before you spend a lot of time. And I'm spending a lot of time on the residency because this is something that always seems to trip people up. So you have to have been a resident for at least 1 year prior to the application, and you have to continue to reside, if you are selected, you have to continue to reside in the region through the exhibition planning period. So think about it. If you are applying to grad school, if you are thinking, if you're applying for jobs outside St. Louis, keep that in mind. Would you be able to be available? Would you be able to keep this residency requirement if you were selected? Okay, just a few more quick things. You have to be 18 or older. Can't have won previously. Graduate or postgraduate students are fine. Undergraduate students, not eligible. This is kind of a newish thing. So artist collectives are eligible, but the award is going to go to an individual artist. Okay, so and this more came up with another opportunity in St. Louis, but it needs to be for individuals. Don't apply in collaboration with another nonprofit, right? The award needs to go to an individual. Okay, so this is what happens after you hit send. It goes in a black hole, something mysterious happens, and then you just get an email, right? But after you hit send, the applications are first reviewed for eligibility and completeness. It's a really short application. I really hope that incompleteness is not an issue. I think, last year there were 2 years ago, there were about 150 applications just based on what I'm hearing from other opportunities here in St. Louis. I think there will be more this year, personally, but we never know. The jurors will review the work samples and exhibition proposals. Hello? There we go. Electronically. We'll talk about this when we talk about work samples, but I think it's always good to know, and this will become apparent when I start talking about some tips for putting your exhibition proposal description together, your artist statement together. They have to read at least 150 applications, right? They're not going to spend an hour on each one. And these are busy people. They're going to be looking at it on their laptops, in airports, in between meetings. It's this is all the more reason why you've got a very brief window to make, a killer impression. So keep that in mind as we talk through all these things, and you're like, man, Brigid is really driving home some of these things. This is why. Because I want your application to stick out and make the best possible impression in a very short amount of time. So they're going to review all the work samples electronically. The CAM staff is not a part of this process. So you can be very nice to the CAM staff. You should be very nice to the CAM staff. But I think it's good to know that they are actually not the final decision makers. So we talked about that. They will select, so the jurors will select the 10 finalists, and then they will convene again after the studio visits to make the final selection. So Misa announced at the time, earlier today, it was 2. So I think it's worth taking a moment to do look at these folks' work. Look at what they're interested in. I'm not saying you need to, customize your proposal. Don't compromise, anything because you think it'll, be more competitive with these particular people. But I do think it is helpful to know sort of the caliber of people of the curators who are going to be looking at these, and do think about that. Like when you're editing and reviewing and evaluating your own proposal work before you submit, keep in mind like the very academic scholarly work that these folks are doing, and the type of art that they're looking at every day. Who was the third? Leslie Hewitt. I think the Kemper here just bought one of her works. Yeah, okay. All right, selection criteria. What are they looking for? Mysterious, ineffable question, right? But we can talk about a few things. A clear sense of vision, an artistic signature, and a unique and distinctive voice. Think about your favorite artist. Somebody shout out their favorite artist, or one of their favorite artists. Okay, yes, awesome. Kendrick Lamar. Nick Cave's a great example. You walk into a gallery and it's full of Nick Cave, you know who that artist is right away, right? Like, there's nobody else that makes work like him. He's got an incredibly clear artistic signature, right? Like, clear vision, unique, distinctive. There's a lot to unpack about it. It's exciting. Like, a unique and distinctive voice is really what's going to stick out. Work that is contributing to contemporary art. We talked about one of the purposes of this opportunity is to showcase the exciting, national, global caliber stuff that's happening, that's being made here in St. Louis, right? This is, and so stuff that is reflective of that is what's going to be selected. So, work that shows an intellectual approach that's like greater than the sum of its parts, that has ideas that you can dig into. All of these things are going to be, part of what's going to make for an excellent proposal. Professionalism of the application, of course, that you've put some thought into your work samples. Clear, concise, intentional writing, and that the proposal feels specific to CAM and the GRB. So I'm curious, those of you in this room, how do you keep up with contemporary art as part of your practice? Yeah. E-Flux? Anybody else? Mm-hmm. Reading criticism, yeah. Create Magazine. Cool. Yeah, I heard of, I might follow them on something, but yeah. Anybody else? How do you keep up with contemporary art? How do you know what's going on? Art fairs, yep. Anything else? Getting harder to find. Anybody go to CAM? The Luminary? Slam? Okay. How do you learn about new artists in other cities? The same. Go there if you can. And how do you expose yourself to new ideas or cultivate your own ability to critique? Read. Just. Exhibition catalogs, perhaps? Like the nice library that's just outside the store. Listening to artist talks is an excellent way to improve your own, to obviously expand your horizons, cultivate your taste, but also, it's when you hear somebody talk about their work and they've got a turn of phrase, you're like, oh yeah, that's how I want to talk about my work. Yeah. Any podcasts that people listen to? Focal Point? I don't know that one. Ooh, okay. I'll check that out. Oh, Bad at Sports. Oh, they've been around a long time. Yeah. Art Curious. So, if you are not sort of regularly following these things, I really encourage you, this is part of your homework, right? this is part of, your professional art work, as a contemporary artist, is keeping up with what's going on in contemporary art, right? Also really recommend, if you have contemporary artists that you like and follow, what galleries are they represented by? What other artists are those galleries showing? Right? There's this is how, if you're not familiar with the names, get to know them. But, this is, there's a lot, in here about sort of what does it mean to have work that's in conversation with contemporary art. That doesn't mean following trends or being reactive or responsive to, any one thing in particular. But, is your work, could you see your work, what if, like I just mentioned, the, artists that you like, that you're interested in, what galleries are they at? Could you see your work at that gallery, or is there another gallery that, you could say, okay, that's my dream gallery. I would love to be in that company of artists. What are the qualities that help an application to be selected? Misa helped put this together a couple of years ago, and I still think it's really helpful because I think it's a helpful way to think about, none of this is like a magic formula, but it's a way to think about how do the panelists generally kind of weight these different ideas. The biggest one being this idea that your proposal is contributing to this contemporary art conversation in some way. Thinking about where you are in your art career, right? Is this sort of the right time where the GRB is going to be most helpful for you as an artist in your art career? The strength of your past work. That's just, have you shown that, your work has grown and deepened over the years? Quality of the application. This, it says 10%, but it's like none of these are like totally unimportant, right? Just sort of the concept, the proposal concept itself, sort of the quality of the concept. Is the vision clear? And then of course the old just right place, right time. There may be two proposals. This is one of the things about sitting in on a mock panel, or if you have the chance to hear curators talk about work of art, they may say, look, these are both great. One of them just feels more of the moment than the other. So Michelle had helpfully put together some advice from past GRB winners. And this is from the 20th anniversary event that was last year, 2 years ago? Yeah. So I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this because, again, these will be available afterwards. But, Sarah Paulson is, I would love to get her as a consultant, honestly, for maps. She's like such an artist. And if you don't know her work, please check her out. It's playful and it's sincere and it's just really wonderful. But I love the way that she talks about, or she's kind of showing this process of how, at least she got to her, idea for GRB proposal. And it's one of these the iterative process, the artistic process, the creative process, don't reinvent the wheel, let it shapeshift. What you're thinking right now may look totally different by the time you're ready to hit submit, and that's okay. So, get other people's thoughts and ideas. Is this a project I truly want to make? I love that she put that on there, right? It's something that's very easy to get lost, but make sure you're still excited about it by the time your application's ready to submit. She also made this, about sort of what the GRB means to her, what receiving it meant to her. And this is, all the other benefits, all the other reasons to apply besides just the award and the exhibition, right? So getting to work with the curators and the jurors, getting to having the opportunity to collaborate that she didn't have before, seeing your art professionally installed. I mean, all these things that we talk about, this is why it's for emerging and mid-career, right? It's meant to be this sort of platform to take your work to the next level. Should I? Oh, okay.
I kind of look at the calendar, and usually in the fall, I kind of announce it's art season, and there's going to be a series of dates and deadlines. And then I refer to go on the hunt. I look at who the jurors are, where they are, I look at all their shows, I read their writings, and I get kind of nerdy. And I just want to know what their voices are and what they've done. And intuition, I don't know if there's any rhyme or reason, but I base my submissions on that type of research. I feel like the more you do it, it's like a muscle. It becomes easier, and I always tell a lot of younger artists or students that once you write, go ahead and apply to everything. It's even if you don't get it, you've done something that you kind of don't realize that you've done, and that is that you've created your artist statement, you created a project summary. And every time you do it, you get it tight to 500 words, 250 words, and you just constantly sculpt this application, and then I kind of say I bait my hook and I cast it. And whenever it gets to the GRB or whatever, then I take that language and I run with it. Because it made it through, it's speaking. And so that's how, that's just my, that's how I prepare, that's how I evaluate my strategies for applying to things.
Did you know how to do that when you did GRB? I mean, was that the beginning? It was early.
No, I mean, I laugh at the first application that I wrote. I think it was I don't know what I'm gonna do, but I'm gonna drive around, I'm gonna think about nights, and it's gonna, it was just like I was scatting or something. It was bad.
I started applying, I believe back in 2018. My issue was not really with the proposal, because I could get to the, pass the proposal. I was shortlisted all 3 times that I applied. So it was really about now, how do I get to have these 3 jurors understand my vision? Because, as an artist, my practice kind of evolves with the spaces that I'm in. I don't have a definitive most of the time it kind of grows with the space. It's more site specific, or I'm responding to a particular location. So it's really hard for me to narrow it down and just give them a product, if you may. But I realized after the second time that I need to hone things in, and if I could create a model of the space, I should do that. I remember exactly where I was. I was at Fountainhead in Miami, and I got the call from Wasan, I believe, and she said, "Well, you've been shortlisted again," you know, and I'm like, "Oh, great."
That's a great example. You know, Yvonne is, I mean, having a great career, and you know, is just kind of an unstoppable machine. But that kind of blows people away when they learn that she applied like 4 times before she was selected. You know, like, because she seems like such a rock star, but like she didn't. She had to keep applying, right? I think, you know, just to this kind of wrap up this point about sort of what are they looking for? What is this, you know, sort of caliber of contemporary art that we're talking about? Obviously, one of the best places to look is the past recipients. So if you did not have a chance to see the previous iteration of the GRB, I highly recommend, you know, look at the website, there's some, I think still like artist talks on CAM's website that you can check out. So, you know, take a look and you know, I wouldn't necessarily say that there's, you know, any single thing that these folks all have in common, except for that clarity of vision. These are all very signature artists. Like, you can recognize their work, you know, really quickly. So again, this is kind of like, do your homework, you know, think about, okay, how would I see myself, you know, fitting on this list? The other thing that's, I think, really helpful are these short descriptions of, here's the artist, here's who they are, this is what their work is about. Do this exercise. If you were, you know, do the exercise of, okay, I was selected, what does this look like for me? Put my name here, like, I'm a what kind of artist, you know, like, what do I do? You know, what's it about? Like, it's so hard, to be honest. Like, it's, you know, it's really hard to do for yourself, but it's so worth doing. Yeah, this proposal does not include a budget. I think, you know, we'll talk about that a little bit, in that, you know, if your proposal seems like it would be wildly outside of a $25,000 budget, I think there would be questions. But, you know, not a bad idea to do, again, just some pen and paper, back of the napkin figures, including paying yourself for your time. But, you know, if part of what you would be, you know, if part of your process of, you know, putting the exhibition together would involve travel or research or whatever, like, that should be part of it, you know. Oh, oops, okay. So we'll go through each of these, your artist statement, the proposal itself, artist CV, and your work samples. Again, I applaud CAM and the Gateway Foundation for having a very simple, straightforward application. But, you know, kind of like a blank wall, it's like simple and also a little like terrifying, right? Like, there's not a lot of room for error. Okay, everybody. Some of you have done this before. Put your hands up. We're going to take the artist applicant pledge together. You ready? I solemnly swear that I will draft my application answers in an offline document and save them to my hard drive, and that I will not compose my application answers in the application platform. Writing, thank you. Thank you. Yes. Yes. Writing, sitting down and saying, I'm going to write my GRB proposal, and opening up Submittable is not the way to do that. You don't want to have to call CAM at 11:30 on June 1st and say, oh my gosh, I don't know what happened. My computer crashed and I lost everything that I was working. You don't want to make that call. They don't want to get that call. They're not going to be here at 11:30. So work on it offline, save that ish, and you can use it for other stuff, right? But do not put anything original in the platform. Okay. What is an artist statement? I'm not going to ask who has an artist statement, who doesn't, because I'm just going to presume that even if you've had one for 20 years, it could probably use a refresh. It could probably use a reboot, right? So it's a brief description of your work that provides the reader with information about your sources, ideas, process, inspiration. Basically, what's going to help me as a viewer appreciate your work? What's going to inform me about something I might not be able to get just by looking? Usually 2 to 3 paragraphs. It informs the viewer about your work. It doesn't need to describe or replicate the work, right? That's not what it's about. And then consider updating your artist statement every time you complete a new singular body of work, you change, direction, you're experimenting with new medium. It's one of these things, right? It's like your dating profile. You can, it's always kind of worth reviewing and seeing if there's ways to update it. It is not your biography. It is not, I was born and da-da-da. It is about who you are as an artist. So a couple of questions to start the writing process or to refresh your current statement. And you don't have to answer all of these, but, just to kind of get the juices flowing, right? So where does your inspiration come from? Is it a particular part of your background that you draw from? Something historical, from pop culture, from nature, right? This is a very basic place to start, but where do you get your ideas? What are you endlessly curious about or fascinated by? I think this is one of the most compelling things that can come through in an artist statement. Artists, in a lot of ways, are researchers, right? You're investigating ideas. What could you just talk about until 2 a.m. that you were working through when you're making art, right? And I should also say that, art making is a intuitive process, right? We're not when we're in the process of art making, we're not necessarily thinking I'm being inspired by such and such right now. I was listening to a podcast a couple years ago with one of my favorite video game designers, and the interviewer was saying when you had this element of the game, surely were you thinking about this other thing that I knew from that he knew from his past, because he had obsessively researched this guy, and the game designer was like, I wasn't thinking about anything. He was like, I was just doing it because I was interested in it. And in the moment of the interview, he's like, yeah, now that you say it, I probably was, inspired by that. I probably was drawing from that. But in the moment, you're not thinking about it. It's really, the kind of thing you can only get at through reflection, right? Through taking this time. And this is where, refreshing, rebooting, updating an artist statement, creating an artist statement can kind of help to prompt that and give you some insights into your own work. So I think one of the most interesting things you can do is look at work you made 2 years ago, 5 years ago, this year. Do you notice any recurring themes or ideas that maybe you hadn't noticed before? Or ask somebody else to look at your portfolio. Are there things that are jumping out to them? What about your process, either creative or constructive, might your viewer find interesting? I personally find, in doing consultations for maps, I've looked at a lot of artist statements. I cannot tell you how many artist statements, we spend so much time talking about this idea, that idea, da-da-da, and I finally say, well, how did you make this? And the artist will describe this incredibly interesting process. It's this wet colloidal photography, or it's some kind of, or I use this unique material. I have to order this special kind of metal from such and such, and then I had to learn how to use it. The process of making is so foreign to so many people, and as artists, because you're living it, it might not seem apparent, but I promise you, the actual process of making is always more interesting than artists think it is. So please, please, please spend at least a sentence or two on your actual art making process, the materials, the technique. Did you have to learn how to do something recently that you didn't know before? What are there challenges with working in your medium that lend themselves to the meaning of the work? And where are you in your journey, in your overall development as an artist? I think in your artist statement, it is helpful to have maybe a little bit of reflection on years of studying this has brought me has taught me that there's so much more to learn or whatever. But giving the viewer a sense of sort of where you are in your artistic development can also be really helpful. Just a couple of more practical things. Please make I statements rather than you statements. We've heard it all in therapy. Goes for your artist statement too. Talk about what your art does for you, not what it's supposed to do to other people, right? This is talk about what you're trying to do. Talk about what you're excited about. Please use the thesaurus. Use active words. The English language has the most amazing verbs, right? So, are you looking to explore, to question, to test, to search, to challenge, to experiment, to juxtapose? There's all kinds of interesting verbs that you can use. Please do not make sweeping generalizations about the world and its inhabitants. And I know there's a lot to say about the world right now. Unless there is something very specific that you are responding to, that your work is responding to, we all live in the world. We all know what's going on. But, and again, I wouldn't say it if I didn't see it all the time, sweeping generalizations about, men and women and da-da-da. We don't need it unless your work is responding to something very specific. Schedule a studio visit with a friend or family member if you're having trouble getting started. And it might seem awkward at first, but again, in my experience with doing consultations, with helping people with artist statements, so something that artists have said to me is, if I could put it in words, I wouldn't be an artist, right? However, can be true. However, I also can't tell you how many times I've read a sentence that someone has written in their artist statement, and I've said, well, what did you mean by that? What are you trying to get at? And the most eloquent words come out of their mouth. And I'm like, oh my God, we need to be recording this. This is perfect. I totally appreciate that in conversation, especially when it's someone you're comfortable with, you may find yourself articulating things that you might struggle to put into words when you're sitting in front of a laptop, right? Don't be afraid to hit record. If you have on your phone or some other tool, don't be afraid to invite somebody to come and kind of have a recorded conversation, because you could surprise yourself, Although then you have to listen to your own voice, which I know could be awkward, but be prepared to accept that what you think your work is about might not be the most interesting thing that others see in it. I just had an artist consultation recently, and I had to tell this artist, I was like, your artist statement is I wouldn't even know that it goes with what your work samples are. Not because this is a bad artist statement or anything, but I'm just getting something totally different out of it. And they just had no idea. They were like, wow, I can't believe anybody would have seen that. And they weren't upset or anything, but be prepared that, somebody might say oh, clearly this, you were thinking about XYZ and might not have occurred to you at all. Finally, give too little, not too much. It's in bold and red for a reason, right? I think it's Pascal, the mathematician, 18th century mathematician, is quoted. He wrote a letter to a friend that was 10 pages long, and at the top he wrote, "I'm sorry this letter is so long, I didn't have time to write a shorter one." Right? Editing takes time. but it's better to give too little than too much. Any other questions about artist statements? I did not, just for the sake of time, I didn't include like samples of artist statements because I've done that in the past. I'm happy to, if for these slides to be shared, I'm happy to share like the MAPS guide to artist statements as a follow-up to this workshop. That does have some examples. But honestly, like, again, look at your favorite artists' gallery sites, look at their bios, they're gonna have their artist statements on there. Okay, exhibition proposal. Consider starting with an executive summary sentence. This is not required. When you log into the application, it's just an empty box and it says 500 words. But I strongly encourage you to do a Mad Libs exercise because this will kind of force you to get that punchy, like journalism, inverted pyramid, first sentence right out of the gate. So if selected for, and you don't have to word it exactly this way, but like if selected, I didn't update that date. For the 2026 Great Rivers Biennial, I will, again, verbs, create, produce, install, something. What? What is the crux of what you are going to do? Like, you're gonna make a noun, right? So a series of something, a large scale something, an interactive what? That will explore, challenge, invite viewers to, it will investigate something, it will do something, right? What's the point of it? What are you doing? That will showcase or question. What's the impact of your work? When people come, they see your exhibition, what do you want them to think about when they leave? You will probably need to come back and do this last. So I highly recommend work through your proposal. Again, take time, allow yourself time, free write. You're gonna write something, it's gonna be way too long, you have to go back and edit. You're gonna write something, you're gonna be like, no, that's not what I wanna say. Go back and edit. Get it, refine it, get it down to a place where you think you're getting close, and then go back and write this sort of executive summary sentence. Again, the jurors are going to be reading 150 to 200 proposals, right? You want yours to stick out. They're going to lose patience real fast if they've gotten halfway through your proposal description and they don't know what your exhibition's about. So, hit them on the head. So the proposal component is very important. So again, we talked about sort of this elevator speech, starting with that summary sentence. Again, just some things to get you started. What ideas or experiences are informing this work specifically? What research have you done, or what will you explore? Again, I really feel like this opportunity is all about thinking big. Right? What's going to take your work to the next level? If it's something that like you could just make in your garage, is that going to be as compelling as something that really is going to make the most of the award and the opportunity? So what research, are you interested in doing? Is it going to involve like learning a new skill, or taking a skill you already have and apprenticing or working with somebody to take it to the next level? What will the viewer experience be like? What's it going to be like for people when they walk in the room? And how is it specific to CAM and this opportunity? Again, if it's just like, again, we talked about sort of recycling. Juan talked about it in the video. And I think that that's good, but don't forget to, make sure that it's relevant for this opportunity. How would it spur the creation of new work for you or take your work to the next level? Is it just on a bigger scale? Is that compelling enough? Or is there something else about it that you would not be able to do otherwise without this opportunity? And really, I think, the most important thing is focus more on selling your vision than on a detailed explanation. Again, they don't ask for a budget. They don't ask for a timeline. They don't ask for, there's a lot you're not asking for. You're asking for what's the vision. And, you're going to have a stronger proposal if it seems like you know what you're talking about, if your CV and your work samples and everything else is sort of backing that up. But you don't need to use a lot of your word count real estate on the practicalities of, like, I'm going to need this much lumber and this much. Like, you don't need to get into that kind of detail. Any questions so far? Okay. So I wanted to add just a note on using AI. Again, with maps, with the artists that we've been meeting and talking with, a lot of artists are starting to use AI. And I think that it's worth saying that, like, it can be helpful for proofreading, for clarity, that kind of thing. But I know that there are programs out there. I was trying to play around with some of them on my own just to sort of see how they work. A lot of them you have to pay for, and I didn't want to pay. But, I know there are programs out there where it's like, oh, you could just upload some images and throw a few words in there, and it'll spit out an artist statement. All these things that we've been talking about, like the process of writing, of going through this writing exercise, is as much about your own mental, like, refining of the work, questioning, like, getting it to a new place, a place where you feel confident talking about it. That's going to make your work better, right? It's going to make your proposal better. So, you're really cheating yourself out of that if you are relying on AI to put all the words together for you. Not to mention that, like, it does have a distinct voice. Still, it's going to be kind of obvious if you use it. So I'm not going to put anybody on the spot, but I did just want to mention that. Like, I don't think it's evil, but and I don't want to ignore the fact that a lot of people are using it. But, I feel like you're not going to have something that feels very specific to your voice, your vision, and it's probably not going to be specific to CAM and the GRB. And also, there's the old, like, if you're not going to bother to write it, why should they bother to read it? Right. Okay. So a couple more writing prompts. What are you interested in? What are you excited about pursuing? Again, talking about sticking out from the pool of 150 applications, let your excitement come through. Like, you can tell when you read a proposal, right, that somebody is really excited to make something happen. Let that come through. It will help you stick out. Where does it fit within the context of your career? And does it fill the ambition indicated by the award size? Again, I've done consultations for people who've been putting together proposals for the GRB, and I've said, okay, like, if you had to, actually put a budget together for this, what do you think the budget would be? And it's like $8,000 because they're just using what they used for RAC or whatever. And it's like, that's not going to stick out. That's not going to be compelling for this opportunity. And again, part of the function of this opportunity in general is to prompt you to think bigger. One of the things from Sarah Paulson's illustration is make the work that you would be making in 10 years. What's the work that you could see yourself making in 10 years? Right. That's what your proposal should be about. We'll talk about this with the work samples, but as you're thinking through what you'd like to do, you can include a rendering of your proposed project as part of your work samples. And that might be really helpful for some people. So you can do a rendering. It might just be for scale. Like, it might just show, like, here's what the installation would look like. And you have some, like, of those, like, fake architecture rendering people, or whatever. Or CAM makes the dimensions of the galleries available on the website. So you can use that, if it's for, like, an installation, like when Lyndon did the basketball court. Was anybody here for that? That was amazing, right? But he submitted a rendering of, here's what the gallery looks like with a asphalt basketball court. Dean, it was amazing. But he submitted that as part of his work samples, was a rendering of it. Okay, so logistics. use these to inform your planning and proposal, but like you don't need to have all this detail in your narrative. So just so you know, that the selected artist will be responsible for all procurement and production. So remember when I said artists need to be the CEO of a one-person small business? Now you're going to be a project manager, right? So, you know, if you have vendors that you would need to get quotes from, if you need to source materials and supplies, you know, if you need stuff to be framed, if you need, like, you're going to be in charge of all that. So CAM will assist with shipping and getting work into the museum, the installation, all of that. The gallery selection, exhibition layout, etc. You know, this is all gonna like sort of happen. This is part of working with the curator, part of working with the museum staff, the exhibition designer, all that kind of stuff. That's part of this like professional experience, right, of receiving this award is, you know, working with museum staff on the final installation. Okay, artist CV. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this, but I always want to mention it because sometimes it can be intimidating when you see this on an application, when they ask for you to, you know, upload your artist CV. It does not have to be long. It is only to let the jurors know where you are in your art career. That is its sole function. Nobody gets an award because their CV was longer than somebody else's, okay? If you are not familiar with artist CVs, they are different from your resume. It includes your art career info only. Couple of bullets of what should be included. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it because the College Art Association has spent a lot of time on it, and I don't need to duplicate what they've already done. But go to CAA, or if you just Google, you know, College Art Association artist CV, they have a really wonderful guide. They have templates. They have examples. It's really, really helpful. Please follow their guidelines. They're really straightforward. Okay, work samples. Any questions about the artist CV or the proposal description before we go to the work samples? Okay. Oops. Okay, so you have the opportunity to upload 5 images or video sound files. There's also a place to put, like if you have an artist website, you know, there's a couple places for links on there. So for sound video files, limit your submission to around 30 seconds and make sure that your video is like, will start right where you want the jurors to see it. Again, keep in mind, they're on laptops, they're looking at 150 things. Like you don't want them to have to do anything besides click a link as much as possible. Images should be 300 DPI. Please follow the labeling convention. As somebody who has been on the back end of these things, when people do not follow the labeling convention for their images, it is such a pain. So please, please, please follow the labeling convention. No composite images. It is so tempting, I know, when you only have 5 work samples to have like the big image and a detail. Don't do it. If you need to use if you want to show a detail, that's 2 work sample slots. Don't do that. Okay, a couple of basic work sample tips. So curate your work samples to best showcase your brand as an artist and that they give a sense of cohesion, right? So we talked earlier about like you walk into a gallery that's, you know, all full of Nick Cave stuff, you know right away, like you get a sense of like, okay, this guy's about color and shapes and like the costumes and everything. Like, you know, think about what would your brand be as an artist and then what images best represent that kind of work together. It's so tempting, I know. You know, okay, I'm mostly doing ceramics now, and I made this awesome drawing when I was in school, and I really want to include it. Like, what's the best representative of your work now? And if you're having trouble deciding what best supports your proposal, right? If you work in a lot of different mediums, but your exhibition proposal is specific to one medium, like, what does your work support that? Your work samples. You know, goes without saying, but like quality of your work samples is really, really important. Fill the frame, if you, like, phones are great, but if you can work with a photographer, especially if you can do like installation shots to give a sense of scale, I think that's really recommended. And then look at your images on a variety of screens if possible. It never ceases to amaze me how different things look on different screens, especially if color is really important to your work. Like, it's, the way something looks on this monitor, that laptop, and your phone, it can look totally different. So when you're choosing your images, like, email them to yourself, email them to a friend, take a look at it on different screens, and make sure you're choosing images that can kind of work, at a variety of different levels. Okay, and we talked about the rendering. You can include a rendering of your proposed project. And I don't think I have a mention of it, but the work samples, so you have the opportunity to put descriptions. It says, like, optional or whatever on there. Like, really, though, put descriptions of your work samples. Like, I think it's, as somebody who's been on the other side, I think it's really helpful. Certainly, like, if you can't get a sense of scale, and scale is important, I think it's really helpful. Okay. So, something that I do every year as part of this presentation, so some of you will have seen this before, but like I said, the jurors are going to be looking at 150 applications. That means they're going to be looking at, oh shoot, I should have done this math beforehand, 700 plus work samples, right? So they're probably going to look at them like this. That's it. That quick, right? So when you're curating your work samples, that's why we focus on think about your branding, think about the quality, think about how are you going to make an impression that quickly, right? Like, that's your shot, So make sure your work samples really stick out. They work as a whole. Okay. Any other questions about work samples? I could talk about work samples for like an hour, so I'm sparing you all. But okay. It's really helpful to have somebody else look at your work samples too before you submit, just FYI. After the announcement is made, if you are selected, there will be a contract with CAM, so you will be responsible for some deliverables. Again, as the CEO of the one-person small business that is your artistic practice, this is now you're legal in compliance. So you will sign a contract. You will be assigned to a gallery. It is probably likely that, even if you're in your proposal, if you say, I'm envisioning being in Gallery A, that everybody else also envisioned being in Gallery A. So, the curators will work with you. You'll be assigned to the gallery. And it'll look great. You must make yourselves available for follow-up visits, PR, work, like interviews, talks, all the stuff that comes along with it, which I would hope is part of the reason why you're applying, because you're interested in doing all that stuff. So you might be asked to engage in public programming. In fact, I can guarantee you will be asked to engage in public programming, giving a talk, so make sure that you're comfortable with all that. And if Sue from VLAA, the Volunteer Lawyers and Accountants for the Arts, were here, she would strongly encourage me to remind you all that this award and any other award that you get through an opportunity like this is taxable income. So keep that in mind when you're doing your budget, and that when it's time to do your taxes in little less than a year, that you would need to report this as taxable income. And if you have concerns about that, you might work with somebody to help itemize your expenses and that kind of thing. And that's it.